The greatest danger to civilization is not the evil man. It is the good man who has fallen asleep. What if I told you that the most dangerous force on earth isn't malice, hatred, or even ideology? What if it's something far more insidious, a psychological sickness that can infect the most brilliant minds, turning compassionate, intelligent, educated people into instruments of destruction? This isn't a dystopian fantasy. It is a terrifying theory, born in the darkest chapter of human history, and it has never been more relevant than it is today. This is the diagnosis of our modern world. Picture this: a renowned scientist with multiple degrees, a pillar of rational thought, suddenly starts believing and spreading dangerous misinformation. A compassionate teacher, loved by their students, begins endorsing harmful ideologies that contradict everything they once stood for. A loving parent, whose world revolves around their children, starts making decisions that endanger their very future. These are not evil people, not in the traditional sense. They are intelligent, well-meaning individuals who have fallen victim to what the German pastor and philosopher Dietrich Bonhoeffer identified as the true power of functional stupidity. And here is what makes this truly terrifying. This sickness is not happening to other people on a distant screen. It is a silent pandemic, and the contagion is in the air we breathe, the feeds we scroll, the conversations we have. It is happening to people just like you and just like me. The Spanish artist Francisco Goya captured this with chilling prescience in his famous etching, "The sleep of reason produces monsters." Today, we will walk into the heart of this darkness. We will explore the nature of this modern plague, a sickness of the soul that Bonhoeffer diagnosed from his prison cell. We will dissect how it spreads through our society like an invisible virus. And most importantly, I will give you the tools, the intellectual and moral antibodies, to inoculate yourself against it. But I must warn you, this knowledge is a heavy burden. Once you truly see how it works, you can never unsee it. In the heart of the 20th century, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, a brilliant theologian from an intellectual German family, watched his entire society, a nation of poets, philosophers, and scientists, descend into the madness of Nazism. He saw his colleagues, his friends, his fellow clergymen, educated and cultured people, begin to support policies and a leader that contradicted every moral principle they claimed to hold. From his prison cell, awaiting execution for his role in a plot to assassinate Hitler, he grappled with a terrifying question. How could this happen? His conclusion, written in his famous letters and papers from prison, was startling. It was not malice or simple ignorance that paved the way for tyranny. It was something he called stupidity. But let us be precise, for Bonhoeffer was not talking about a low IQ or a lack of education. He was describing a far more complex and dangerous phenomenon, a functional stupidity, a moral and intellectual failure. It is the willful surrender of independent thought, the abdication of personal judgment in favor of an overwhelming group pressure or a powerful ideology. He observed that this state was not an innate flaw, but a sociological one. It is a sickness that emerges when a person, often under immense social, political, or economic pressure, outsources their critical thinking. They stop wrestling with complex realities, and instead, they adopt a set of pre-packaged, externally supplied answers. He wrote with chilling accuracy. In conversation with him, one virtually feels that one is dealing not at all with him as a person, but with slogans, catchwords, and the like that have taken possession of him. He is under a spell, blinded, misused, and abused in his very being. This is the core of the sickness. The individual mind is hijacked. The person is no longer a thinking entity, but a host, a vessel for a virus of borrowed convictions. And the most dangerous part? Because the sleeper believes they are on the side of good, they become absolutely immune to correction. Reasons fall on deaf ears. Facts become hostile objects to be deflected. The sleeper's mind is a closed fortress, and they are both the prisoner and the guard. How do you diagnose this sickness in others, or more importantly, in yourself? Here are the 5 primary symptoms. A reliance on slogans. The infected person stops speaking in nuanced, original sentences and begins communicating almost exclusively in prepackaged slogans, memes, and ideological catchphrases. Their arguments are not their own. They are perfect, verbatim echoes from their chosen group or media source. They have ceased to be a thinker and have become a repeater. They don't have opinions. Opinions have them. A preference for outrage over nuance. The sleeper's mind no longer seeks truth. It seeks emotional satisfaction. They are drawn to information that confirms their existing worldview and provokes a strong, visceral emotional response, like anger, validation, or tribal belonging. Complex, ambiguous truths that require careful, slow, and uncomfortable thought are dismissed as boring, deceptive, or even a form of attack. The aggressive rejection of dissonance. When confronted with facts or evidence that contradict their adopted beliefs, the sleeper's brain doesn't engage in analysis. It engages in self-defense. They will instinctively attack the source, question the motive of the messenger, or simply ignore the inconvenient information altogether. Their personal identity has become dangerously fused with their beliefs, so an attack on their beliefs is felt as a fundamental attack on their very being. The redefinition of virtue as allegiance. The infected person starts to believe that their virtue is no longer defined by their individual actions, kindness, honesty, courage, but by their unwavering allegiance to the right group. Goodness becomes about holding the correct set of opinions and signaling loyalty to the tribe. This dangerous shift makes them capable of justifying actions they would have previously considered abhorrent, all in the name of a greater good. The comfort of absolute certainty, perhaps the most insidious symptom of all. The sleeper feels an immense, often exhilarating, sense of clarity and purpose. They genuinely believe they have woken up and finally see the world for what it truly is. This feeling of certainty is a powerful, addictive drug, and it makes them utterly resistant to the humble, difficult, and uncertain work of real, independent thinking. Take a hard, honest look at this list. Does any of it feel uncomfortably familiar? The terrifying truth is that we are all susceptible to this. If you have ever found yourself believing something simply because your group, your party, or your feed told you to, you have felt the gravitational pull of this sickness. Acknowledging this vulnerability is the first and most critical step toward building your immunity. Bonhoeffer understood that this sickness was contagious, but it spreads not like a biological virus from person to person, but like a psychological one, from the system to the person. Today, the vectors of this contagion have become exponentially more powerful. We are no longer just fighting social pressure. We are fighting $1 trillion global architecture designed to lull our reason to sleep, because a sleeping mind is a profitable mind. The architecture of the algorithm. Social media platforms are not neutral. They do not want you to think. They want you to react. Every click, every share, every microsecond your gaze lingers on a piece of content is a data point fed into an artificial intelligence of unimaginable power. These algorithms have learned that the fastest way to keep you engaged, and therefore profitable, is to feed you a constant diet of emotional candy, outrage, validation, and tribal conflict. They are meticulously designed to create echo chambers that act as intellectual quicksand, pulling you deeper into a world where your own beliefs are reflected back at you infinitely, and all opposing views are silenced. The economics of overwhelm. Our modern economic systems actively, if unintentionally, incentivize intellectual shortcuts. When people are working multiple jobs, drowning in debt, and constantly anxious about housing, healthcare, and their children's future, they simply do not have the mental bandwidth required for careful, nuanced thinking about complex issues. The cognitive load is too high. In this state of perpetual stress, intellectual surrender becomes a rational survival strategy. It becomes more efficient to adopt a simple narrative and a group identity than to invest the time and energy required for genuine, lonely, and difficult understanding. The tyranny of the digital group. This is where Bonhoeffer's insight becomes truly prophetic. The conformity experiments of Solomon Asch and Stanley Milgram in the 1950s proved what Bonhoeffer had witnessed firsthand. Even courageous, rational individuals will abandon their own clear judgment when faced with overwhelming group consensus. 75% of participants would agree with an obviously wrong answer just to avoid the social discomfort of standing alone. Now, amplify that pressure by a billion. That is the digital age. The group is now a potentially global mob, and the cost of dissent is not just social awkwardness, but public shaming, professional ruin, and complete ostracization. This is the modern threat. We are not just dealing with human manipulation. We are facing non-human systems designed by artificial intelligence to exploit our deepest cognitive vulnerabilities with surgical, inhuman precision. If our brains and our systems are rigged against us, how do we fight back? How do we stay awake when the entire world seems to profit from our sleep? Bonhoeffer believed the answer lay in what he called costly grace, a grace that must be fought for. It is the willingness to think independently, even and especially when it is painful, unpopular, or dangerous. Here is your inoculation. 4 concrete practices to build your intellectual and moral immunity. A daily training regimen for your mind. Actively seek and engage with contradiction. The sleeper's mind craves the comfort of confirmation. The awakened mind seeks the productive discomfort of being challenged. Here is my challenge to you. Find one belief you hold with absolute certainty, and this week, spend 30 minutes reading or watching the most intelligent, thoughtful, and well-reasoned arguments against it. The goal is not to change your mind, but to test if your convictions can withstand honest, rigorous scrutiny. If they can, you will hold them with a newfound, authentic confidence. If they cannot, you will have learned something invaluable about the truth. Master the power of I don't know. In a world that rewards loud, confident ignorance, the simple act of admitting a gap in your knowledge becomes a radical act of intellectual integrity. The next time you are drawn into a conversation about a complex topic you haven't deeply researched, resist the powerful social urge to have an immediate, strong opinion. Instead, say the 3 most powerful and honest words in the pursuit of wisdom. I don't know. This humility is the direct antidote to the false certainty that is the hallmark of functional stupidity. Slow down your reaction and your sharing. Before you post, share, or repost anything online, especially if it evokes a strong emotion like anger or righteousness, implement a mandatory 60-second pause, a full minute. In that time, take a deep breath and ask yourself, am I reacting emotionally or thinking critically? Who profits from my reaction? That brief pause is often enough to break the hypnotic, algorithmic cycle that feeds on our impulsiveness and turns us into unwitting agents of misinformation. Defend your own mind as a sovereign territory. Every time you choose curiosity over certainty, evidence over emotion, and careful thinking over quick reactions, you are doing more than just protecting yourself. you are performing a vital act of resistance. You are defending the very possibility of human wisdom in an age of artificial stupidity. This is not a passive state. It is an active, daily choice. The final, unsettling question Bonhoeffer leaves us with is not whether we are smart enough to avoid this sickness of the mind. It is whether we are courageous enough and committed enough to keep thinking when thinking becomes inconvenient, uncomfortable, or costly. If this film has made you question something you thought you knew for certain, that is not a weakness. It is the first sign of intellectual courage. I urge you, share this video with someone who isn't afraid to think deeply, even when it's uncomfortable. Because in a world designed to profit from our intellectual surrender, the simple, quiet act of thinking carefully becomes the most important form of rebellion we have. What is one belief you are willing to question this week? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe for more guides on how to navigate the modern world. And let's stay awake together. And let's commit together to being the kind of people who stand fast when everyone else has stopped thinking.